Hello, everyone. It's me, Apollo, and today I'm here on this podcast to talk about a fanfic I recently wrote as an English assignment. This fanfic is called Deltarune One Last Fun Adventure. I started writing it around the reveal trailer for Chapter 5, and this fanfic is a prediction of the events of the chapter. So the fanfic begins after the events of Chapter 4 in Chris's room, where Chris is in their bed trying to sleep but can't because their mother Toriel and Sans are partying downstairs, and he also can't stop thinking about the Roaring Night, the Titan, the prophecy, and everything else that has been plaguing him for these past few days. Then suddenly Toriel starts knocking on Chris's door, telling them to wake up because they're going to miss the festival. Toriel then gives a slice of pie to Chris, hands him $20, and tells them to have fun in the festival. So Chris then leaves the house and goes to meet up with their friend Susie, who was waiting close to the house near some trees. Then Susie and Chris go to Noelle's house, which is pretty close to Chris's house, to invite her to the festival. However, Noelle was a little bit apprehensive at first because of the entire thing that happened in her house in chapter 4, with Caro being a little angry at Susie because she was playing with Dessa's guitar. But Susie tells Noelle that if they find Carol, if anything happens, she'll deal with it, she'll say she's sorry. And so Noelle, being a little more confident, decides to join with them and they go to the festival together. And at the festival, they have a lot of fun. They play in all the stalls they could play. They eat all the foods that the festival was offering, like cotton candy, candy apples. And to top it all off, Noelle takes Susie to ride the Ferris wheel with her. And Chris waits for their turn. And while they're waiting, their dad, Asgore, arrives and starts talking with him like about how the festival was and how everything was going. Until Asgore sees Toriel with Sans and gets sad. They have an argument, and Asgore returns to the Flower King, his flower shop. After Asgore had his argument with Toriel, Susie comes back from the Ferris wheel with Noelle. And Susie, seeing that Chris looks a bit down, asks what happened, and Chris tells her what happened, telling that Asgore and Toriel fought, and that Asgore is in the Flower King, and that they worry about how Asgore is. And Susie, also wanting to make a surprise for Noelle, decides to tag along with Chris to go to the Flower King. When they arrive there, they see that the place is emanating a darkness from inside. And when they open the door, a gust of darkness rushes through them. And both of them, knowing what this means, enter the Flower King Dark World and begin their journey through this dark world. After Chris and Susie adjust to the darkness, they see a large open field of pink grass and a golden sun on the sky, shining and nourishing the life beneath it. Susie and Chris then start wandering through the field, where they find Rouse, who is waiting for them inside a patch of grass. Then the three, now finally together, see a large castle in the background with a dark fountain inside of it, emanating darkness and giving this world form. So the three now together, they start going to this castle. They interact with the darkness that were on the fields. They go to a shop to restock their supplies. And when they finally get close to the castle, suddenly the night appears, and the three heroes, knowing that the knight's presence is no good, chase it to the castle. However, the knight outspeeds them and gets there first. And after the knight has already entered the castle, a guard has woken up. This guard wears a armor made of terracotta pots, and it stands in the way of the three heroes. However, they manage to get past this guard, as they did with many other enemies before, and enter the castle. Inside, they see that the place is not very well maintained. It's a bit dirty. There are scribbled notes all throughout the place. There are large boards on the walls with even more notes and dots connecting the notes. And they proceed through this place. They then reach a hallway, and this hallway is very dark. They can't see much around it. And fearing for the worst, they draw out their weapons. And then they start hearing voices around them. They don't know who these voices are coming from, but they know that something is up. And then suddenly the lights turn on, and they see that there's a flower man standing in front of them. This flower man introduces himself as Flowey and shows the trio around the castle, showing the kitchen, the Colosseum, and stopping by a corridor with the room of each of Asgore's 7 colored flowers. And he shows the door to Asgore's room, which has been locked for a while, and Asgore hasn't left his room for also a while. And Flowey tells the trio to go look for the keys for the room, and they go look for the keys around the castle. After they find the 2 keys to Asgore's room, Flowey stops them and confronts them, asking them why they want to seal the fountain. And since Flowey knows that this place is a sanctuary for Asgore, he decides to battle the trio. And after a long battle, Flowey calls for the other flowers so that they can use a special attack of sorts. Each flower uses a special attack based on the Omega Flowey battle attacks, like the Science Soul Knife attack, the Book attack from the Perseverance or Purple Soul, etc. And when it's finally the turn of Flowey to reveal his special attack, the door to Asgore's room is burst open. The knight rushes out, and the knight, seeing that the 3 heroes and Flowey are there, it decides to attack the lights in the hallway to turn the hallway dark. And suddenly, a hot wind comes out from the door, and flames take over the entire palace, burning everything. Chris, Susie, and Rousey only survived this because Chris managed to quickly get their shield and avoid damages by the fire using their shield. Then Asgore comes out of his door looking for the knight, and he doesn't know that the knight left, and he cannot see anything. He can hear Chris's footsteps, but doesn't know that it's Chris, so he attacks Chris, instantly knocking Chris down. Then he can hear Susie, but again, he thinks the knight is just mocking him and that he didn't hit the knight hard enough, and also knocks down Susie. Rousey, being the only party member left, sees that he has no choice but to attack Asgore, and he uses his fire magic to attack Asgore. However, the fire is not strong enough to harm Asgore, since his armor is also too strong, and Asgore deflects the fireball which Rousey cast. However, the fireball hits a wall and starts burning the wall. and lighting up the place, showing that he just hit Susie and Chris, and Asgore, taken by guilt and regret, kneels on the ground and starts crying. Rousey, seeing that there's no better moment to go and seal the fountain, quickly heals both Chris and Susie, and the three go seal the fountain. With the dark fountain now sealed, the darkness is slowly dismantled and the light comes back to Asgore's flower shop, turning it back into how it once was. However, since a lot of fire magic was used, the place is burned in some spots and the flowers, which Asgore once cared for, are now reduced to ash. And Asgore, seeing that what he'd done has hurt so much himself and his child, starts breaking down and kneels crying. Chris, saying that at least in this moment it wasn't exactly Asgore's fault. Sure, he was enraged and all, but he wouldn't have naturally hit Chris. It was a scheme of the night to get Asgore against Chris. And so Chris hugs Asgore. Susie tells that it's no problem, that Asgore was tricked by the night, and Asgore sees hope that he can still make things right and decides to go talk to Toriel and ask for forgiveness for what he's done to right his wrongs. Then Susie and Chris leave the flower shop and decide to hang out through town, see how it's going, and they notice that the festival has ended. And they don't see Noelle anywhere. They go to her house but don't see her. So they decide to go to the only other place she could be, the hospital, because Rudy, her dad, is sick. And when they arrive at the hospital, they see Noelle in shambles, crying, and she looks very, very sad, as if a horrible tragedy has happened. And she remembers the dream she had some days ago, in this case, the events of chapter 2. And she thinks that if it's real, she can create a fountain to try and heal her father. And so she does. She stabs the ground of the hospital and creates a fountain right then and there. And this is where the fanfic ends. So now that the synopsis is over, I'm going to be answering some questions that my teacher has separated for me in the assignment for the podcast, and I'll also be sharing some info about the fanfic writing process and a bit of my feelings and what I got right about chapter 5 of Deltarune. So, firstly, my characters are entirely fictional. I mean, it's a bit obvious, they're all Deltarune characters. I didn't really get any inspiration, like, outside of Deltarune for them, so they're just the base Deltarune characters. So, since this chapter was meant to be a more light chapter, especially when compared to chapter 4, as one of the first lines in the newsletter that Toby released for the announcement of chapter 5 was that this would be one less fun adventure before the sun went down. And also, fun fact, the title of the fanfic, One Less Fun Adventure, is literally the same as this line in the newsletter, because I wanted to title it because of that. I got inspired by that and decided to make it the title. So I mostly, especially for the beginning part, the festival, wanted to make it more fun, more lighthearted and all. That's the overall theme of the first part. And then in the ending, it got a bit darker since, as Toby Fox himself described in the newsletter, this is the sun. The sun is setting and the dark clouds are coming. So the ending is a bit darker, to get to the hook of the next chapter, to hook into the next chapter. So I'm going to stitch this next question, which is about challenges or obstacles that I faced during the writing process, with something that I forgot to mention in the first part. Is, well, I had plenty of challenges with the fanfic, mostly like writing blocks. There were moments where I genuinely couldn't do anything, like where I genuinely just didn't wrote anything at all. And sometimes I just straight up, like, I also have other subjects that I have to take, so I sometimes focus too much on the fanfic, or I focus too much on other subjects and didn't get anything of the fanfic done. So it was a bit complicated in those cases, but I eventually got around to doing it. And one of the major like blocks I had were with the flowers, right? I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know how to characterize them, and I, since this is my prediction and my mind told me that like I had the idea that they were going to be like important players in this dark world, especially considering the part in the trailer that Chris was alone and we saw that the knife attack from the Omega Flowey fight. Like I was sure that the souls from Undertale, the patience, justice, integrity, etc., would reappear here, and I just didn't know how this would work. I didn't know like exactly what I would do. So my characterization, at least physically, was mostly how the items that are related to each soul in Undertale, like the book and the glasses for the purple perseverance soul, the knife and the ribbon for the patience soul or science soul, and so on and so forth. So I basically just based them on the Undertale souls, and I didn't really do much with them actually. They just appear in the final bits. So yeah, then, well, about the universal themes, I mostly wasn't exactly thinking about a universal theme for this fanfic, as I was mostly focusing on just getting what I think would happen in chapter 5 across. So I wasn't exactly focusing on it. But one thing that I see that I made a main focus as a universal theme is the way like is being held like back by our past and trying to go back to it, and that you should like eventually stop, and that even when things are bad they can still get better and you can still go back and fix your mistakes. It's not going to go back to how it was, it's going to be something new, but you can still fix the broken. Also, in one way, I kind of am a bit of a believer in the Des Knight theory, or that at least the knight has some semblance or is similar to the Holiday family. And, well, the incident that made Asgore spiral into this like darkness and all the most problems is the incident that made Des disappear. So the knight is kind of a, at least in my view, a embodiment of this tragedy, of this past mistake. So yeah, that's basically my view on this part. So there are final four questions here for me to answer. And since this part is already a bit more rambly than the first, and more of my thoughts and feelings, and a bit less cut, I'm going to basically try to answer them all now. So, firstly, comparing my fanfic to the original source material, the actual chapter 5, since this is a prediction. Well, I ironically got some things right. Like, I said that the field where you first entered was filled with pink grass. And that's right. The first area, the field, is filled with grass, with pink grass in specific. But the sun only appears later in the next area, which is the cliffs. So I kind of got it right, but I also kind of got it wrong. But yeah, also now going to some more important plot points. I was thinking that Asgore was gonna be a boss because in Deltarune, Toby Fox is kind of one-upping Undertale concepts, things that were shown in Undertale but didn't have much evolving. It didn't have much like growth and all. Like for an example, the Metaton Neo fight that is a Genocide Route exclusive. In Deltarune, we have the Spamton Neo boss fight, which is pretty much a reprise of the Metaton Neo boss fight. It's basically a Metaton Neo if it was an actual fight, because if you know the Metaton Neo fight in Undertale, it it's like not even one attack. You just press attack, and Metaton Neo instantly dies. So it wasn't much of a fight to begin with. But Spamton Neo was a fully fledged fight, kind of a evolution of the original Metaton Neo fight. We also have Gerson and his boss fight, since when Gerson was the first character to actually mention the Deltarune, which is the symbol that we see in Deltarune, which is the three triangles and a circle with wings. And there is a dialogue if you call Undyne while in front of Gerson's shop in Undertale. Undyne, which is she's like a warrior. She's like very strong. She was personally trained by Asgore, which is in Undertale stated to be an incredibly strong monster, and I'll get a bit to him later. Um, Undyne states that Gerson is like badass. He's genuinely strong. He's like she gets hyped that you're in front of his shop. And in Undertale, we never really knew what he did, but Deltarune shows, at least in some way, how he actually was in Undertale, because we see the entirety of the chapter for Dark World and its secret boss, which is well Gerson. We see that he's very strong and he's like he really wants to pass the torch down to the next generation. In Undertale, he taught Undyne how to become a guard, and he taught her justice. In Deltarune, he's teaching Susie hope and that the prophecy can still be rewritten. So it's kind of an evolution, you know? And following this pattern, since Asgore in Undertale doesn't have exactly like a big fight, he's not we don't see his true power. We don't see the fight that you can get in with him, which is in the neutral route. He is holding back a lot. He does not want to kill you in this fight. He isn't going all out. So I was thinking that Deltarune would kind of have a fight with Asgore as a evolution of this original concept that wasn't much built in Undertale, right? But I was wrong in that, partially wrong. I was ironically right that an Undertale character would get a battle in Deltarune. I just didn't guess that it would be Mad Mew Mew, the like cat girl doll that is exclusive to the Nintendo Switch version of Undertale. I was not I I don't even know how to say this, but I was not expecting that. So yeah, my in summary, my fanfic was like very different from the actual chapter 5, but I still got some things right. So, well, now on to the next question. It's the how did you decide on the structure of my narrative? Well, I mostly decided to do like sequence of events that were slowly building up into they getting to Asgore's room, although they never enter Asgore's room. So it was basically they go to a place, they do something, don't really know how to explain this, but yeah. Now the next one is about how my ideas changed during the process of writing. So my initial concepts and comparing to my final concepts actually did change a lot. And one of the main first parts that changed a lot was the Asgore and Toriel argument in the festival. My original idea was that it would be a much more violent fight, it would be more angry. Asgore would be shouting more. But a bit later, I started thinking that it wouldn't be very in character for Asgore to just lash out against Toriel, especially with Chris being so close to the fight, as he was basically just watching it from the bench, right? So it decided to be just a small argument where Asgore gets mad and goes away. Also, well, again, the flowers making their return here. I didn't know exactly what to do with them. I knew that they were going to be antagonistic, but they wanted the best for Asgore, right? So I originally thought of a council, and my original idea was that you would have a one-on-one with each flower, right? That you would pass through their judgment, and as Chris would pass through their judgment, sorry, and they would deem if you were worthy, and in the end, the yellow flower would be the final judge, and then it would play out pretty much like how I wrote it to actually be with Asgore, um, lashing out at the night and burning the place down. But also, sometime later, I started thinking that maybe the yellow flower, which I named Flowey because of the Undertale Flowey, I started thinking that he would be a bit more evil, more purposely evil, and use the other flowers and kind of fuse with them the same way that the Omega Flowey in Undertale did with the souls, right? And that he would use the powers of the other flowers to go against the Fun Gang and keep Asgore in the Dark World Flower Shop. But again, the same thing would happen with Asgore being angry and burning everything down. And then I decided to strike with what I had, which with how I wrote it, which is you separating the flowers in trios, and you fight the yellow flower in the end. This decision was mostly done because one, writing a one-on-one for each flower would take a lot of time, and in the point that I was with that part would take a lot of time. And also, I again didn't know exactly what to do with the flowers, so I kind of bundle them up in trios to make a shorter thing, to shorten up and so I could actually deliver it. But ironically, the main idea, also another idea that changed was Noel creating the Dark World. In the original ideas I had, she would be creating a dark world outside of the hospital, like in the street, effectively beginning the roaring. Although I don't know if creating a fountain in an open area would bring the roaring, but anyway. However, I ended up changing to her opening a dark fountain in the hospital because it make more sense for Rudy to be rushed to the hospital instead of just being left in in the festival outside the hospital in just the street. Especially since hometown is not a very big place, so it's easy to just bring him to the hospital quickly. So I thought that I ended up making Noel open a dark fountain in the hospital. But ironically, the one idea that stayed consistently the same all throughout was Asgore, the way the fight with Flowey would end. Asgore coming out of his room and burning the entire place down. Although the conditions in this were a bit different since the knight suddenly just leaves the place. Because in my original ideas, I thought that the knight would just be like, "Hey, I just want to talk. You know a lot about Dark Worlds, and I want to pick your brain a little, you know." Since Asgore, well, he's effectively a conspiracy theorist about the Dark Worlds. So my original idea was that they would come to have a chat. However, I later ended up deciding to make the knight not be exactly coming for a talk. I actually don't know what I was thinking much, but I know that eventually, whatever the knight was doing with Asgore was going to end up in a fight, right? And they were fighting inside of their room. And they were fighting, and eventually the knight sees that trying to continue fighting Asgore is not going to work, and he leaves, and the events play out, right? But yeah, now, um, now the last question, which are moments uh, that were important to me and resonated for me personally. Well, I could say I'm not gonna say that I had a specific moment, but the fight with Flowey was a bit remarkable for me because well, it was one of the final things I had to do. Ironically, I wrote the final bit, which is after the Dark World, where they're back in Asgore's shop as to how it normally was, and I wrote that before finishing the ending. But the ending is a bit remarkable, although I feel a bit rushed. Although, granted, the reason why I did some things the way I did is because this is effectively a script for like a game for the chapter, right? It's what I so many things are a bit weird in text, but would make more sense as a game, right? Like the cooking session. So the fight with Flowey was a bit one that resonated because I was already like so focused in finishing it that like I I think I was like fighting the script, you know. I was like battling the Word document to get it finished, you know. So that's a bit why it remarked to me. Also, the festival parts were a bit remarkable for me as well because while I was writing it, I was in a mall, in a shopping mall with my grandma and my mom, and I was writing it while walking and while going through the stores with them. So it's kind of funny that it kind of mirrors the festival, you know, because I wasn't in any festival like lots of fun and all, but I was with two other people, my grandma and my mom, going in another city, like going through a mall, looking at things, having fun, eating, you know. So it kind of matches, and also the fact that I was writing a fanfic while walking through a mall, you know. So those are those were some moments that were kind of impactful. But well, anyways, I already talked for way too long. Looking at the recording, it's already like 14 minutes and a half. So I have to thank you guys for, I mean, it's most likely going to be only one person. So thank you, teacher, for being patient enough to listen through this. So I'm going to be saying goodbye and hope if I do this again once more, I hope you wish to tune in. So bye bye, see you next time, and well, let's see what chapter 6 will bring. I'm betting on it being on the hospital, since in the actual ending of chapter 5, Susie says that she's going to reveal that the Dark Worlds were real to Noelle, and I do wonder what will happen in like a failed Snowgrave save. Like, I kind of think that Noelle is going to like end up creating a dark fountain in the hospital because her dad is sick, firstly, and secondly, in a failed Snowgrave, I think that if you actually Snowgraved Birdly, I think she's also going to try and create a fountain to kind of try and save Birdly also, since she did that in the Dark World and all. So yeah, I see you guys next time, and bye bye.